All here. Okay, welcome to our second meeting of April for the municipality of West Perth. Just before we get things going here, I would ask our council and our guests if we'll take a moment of reflection. And I just would like to mention that our former councillor, Anna Marie Murray, her mother passed away just towards the end of last week. So we can maybe keep that family in our thoughts and prayers tonight. So we'll just bow our heads for a moment of reflection. Okay, thank you. All right, so we'll call the meeting to order. First item is the confirmation of the agenda. And is everybody aware of the addition? Okay, so there is one additional item, 6.9.1, that'll be on there tonight. So a motion to confirm the agenda as it was presented tonight would be in order. Moved by Councillor Rose, seconded by Councillor O'Donnell. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Thank you. So we do have, does anybody have a conflict of interest, by the way? No? Okay, if you find that you're in hot water as we go along through the meeting, you can declare it at that time. We have 12 items on the consent agenda. Is there anything there that anybody would like pulled or discussed separately or just a little bit more information on? Councillor Rowe.
Just one quick question. The Township Clearview resolution regarding barriers for politics, especially seeing as I have daughters that I want to see getting into politics at some point myself, and the fact that we only have one female member on our council, we should certainly leave it as something to bear in mind if we find opportunities to promote. I can't even think of how we would do it, but if anybody has ideas, it'd like to be something that we bear in mind at least for future discussion.
Yeah, I would agree with you wholeheartedly. And Diane can vouch for this, I guess. But it basically comes down to the voters as to who gets in. You know, like we can do the promoting all we want, but it really comes down to the individual person. But if you want to pull that and support it separately, I don't have a problem with that, Andrew. I know what you're trying to say here. Anybody else have anything there they would like to pull out? Okay, so that one, Andrew, is what number?
4.9.
4.9. Okay. All right. So we might as well we'll deal with that one currently then. So the resolution with regarding barriers for women in politics from the Township of Curfew, and their resolution is there. So a motion to support that would be in order, and you would like to do that, Andrew? Okay, it's moved by Councillor Fournier. Do we have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Foster. Any further discussion on that? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, if there's nothing else, the consent agenda will a motion of support from 4.1 to 4.8 and 4.10, 11, and 12. Do we have a mover and seconder for that? Moved by Councillor O'Donnell, seconded by Councillor Foster. Any further discussion on any of that? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. Okay. Now, I'm not sure. Do we have, I gotta think who was coming. Pereri? Do we don't, she's not here. I don't, we have a delegation coming and I don't know what the person looks like. So that's why I asked. So. Okay, we'll carry on with the delegations that we have. She indicated she might be a little late. So the first delegation, or the first one on our list here for tonight, is the Perth Huron United Way. And we have Kristen Cairn, Director of Social Research and Planning. So if you would like to come up, and we'll present the floor to you. And there is a little button on there, and when the microphone is on, the red light will light up. There you go. You're in business.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. This is my first opportunity to address you, and I'm providing a customized presentation that was requested to provide some information on some housing basics, some terminology and the housing of spectrum, and then also share the results of a recent survey that we undertook on food insecurity. So the number of individuals experiencing homelessness across our region demonstrates that local resources are insufficient to address the current as well as the future need. And these numbers are a little outdated. They come from a point in time counts, and this comes from 142 in September. That represents Perth, including Stratford and St. Mary's. And additionally, the average rent for a one bedroom has increased to probably about $1,300 late in 2022 and early 2023. So 57% of the households that earn incomes in Perth and Huron counties are below the living wage. And this means that families are working hard in minimum wage positions and are managing multiple part-time jobs. And this leads to a perpetual cycle of poverty within our communities. Additionally, families are forced to make decisions between paying rent and purchasing healthy foods. And we do know that 9% of children in Huron and Perth households live with food insecurity. And this information that I'm about to present comes from Huron Perth Public Health and their recent report called Monitoring Food Affordability. And it has a couple of income scenarios that I'm showing here, courtesy of their research. So from this chart, you can see that an individual receiving social assistance is in debt after paying for just rent and food. And this leaves no additional money for any expenses. You can also see that there's other scenarios here that don't really fare much better. And just here, we see that how much it costs to rent a bachelor apartment, which is actually fairly unrealistic because there are so few bachelor apartments available in our region, and even smaller supply when you get to some of the more rural communities. So that would mean somebody has to pay for a one bedroom apartment. That's even more expensive, or to rent a 2-bedroom apartment and share that with a roommate. So I'm sure most people are familiar with what homelessness is. It refers to a situation when an individual or a family does not have safe or permanent, stable, or appropriate housing, or the means to acquire it. A few other terms here: unsheltered, that refers to people who are living rough. They may be in tents, living from their cars, people that you may see in a bank entrance. And this is only one type of homelessness. However, it is the most easily recognizable by the public. There are also those who live in emergency shelters. So in Perth, that would be ShelterLink, which houses youth from ages 16 to 24, or Optimism Place, which is a women's shelter that also has for children. We do know that shelters are not a solution because it's just an emergency measure for those that are experiencing homelessness, and it is not permanent. There's also people who are provisionally accommodated, and that means people who could be couch surfing in hospitals for stays or incarcerated. So the hidden homelessness in our region is the couch surfers. And these are people who might be staying with friends or family or move from place to place for a week or a few days at a time, trying to find a place to live. And it's estimated that about 80% of the homelessness in our region is hidden. So what you see in your communities of individuals that might be unsheltered and living rough, that's probably only 20% of the actual population that is unhoused. So there's a number of factors that exacerbate homelessness. Could be untreated mental health conditions, people who aren't able to access support or services, perhaps substance abuse. But there's also people who do not have housing because they've experienced family or gender-based violence. And there's many barriers, such as systemic barriers as low income, and I'll touch on that a little bit further too. And this can include seniors that are living on a fixed income, people whose employment status is limited because of disabilities or healthcare inadequacies. And of course, housing and its cost is a major, major factor. There's also discrimination based upon age, gender, race, ability, and immigration status. And those all, if you have one of those facets of your being, then that will also impact your housing status. So we know that housing prices are on the rise. There's been a slight decline in some cases for housing that you purchase, but rent is on the rise. We know that the household income in Canada is up about 30%. However, housing prices are up about 60%. So there's that huge gap and it continues to widen. In Stratford, we know that rental prices have more than doubled in 4 years, and that's reflective of the whole Perth Huron region. So a goal for United Way is to create a common language and a shared model for the housing spectrum. And this shows the housing spectrum. It's broken up into market housing, non-market housing, and the category of individuals that are homeless. So non-market housing, which is the supportive housing, this provides support services for people to live independently. It could provide services such as counseling on site or visits from a nurse practitioner. There's also community housing, which has many different names, social housing, public housing, or some things that are just senior specific. And rent supports, this refers to people who receive rent supplements, something such as Ontario Works or perhaps Ontario Disability Support Program. And affordable housing is most often linked to those rent supports. And then you see the market housing, and that's the private market rent or people who have purchased their housing. And this can be further broken down into attainable and affordable. But I will touch on that a little bit further in the next slides. There's so many definitions, and you'll see that everybody, well, not everybody, but there's multiple definitions within one term too. So it becomes quite complicated. So what is attainable housing? That's a term that we've heard more about over the last couple of years. And you can see here that there's multiple definitions just within our region. United Way likes to equate attainable housing to what a household can afford when they are earning a living wage. And then there is affordable housing. So this is a concept of spending 30% or less of your income on housing. And this concept can apply to both renters or owners. And also incorporated with that is, with the rent or mortgage payment, is the utilities and property taxes. So all of that must equate to 30% or less of your income. And then there's supportive housing. I mentioned about that before, but I just want to touch a little further on that. So that is comprised of both the physical space and the various wraparound support services that are required to keep a person housed in that stable situation. And it's a bit more complex, and it's tailored to what the needs are for the client to maintain their housing. At the housing or at the community level, supportive housing is the most expensive to maintain and administer. But evidence does show that this is still less expensive to society than the alternative, which includes costs of hospital emergency services visits, such as ambulance, police, and the justice system. So I know that was a lot to digest, and that comprises the housing terminology and pieces to tell you about the housing spectrum. And now I'm going to shift gears to the recent research that the United Way undertook. So in November 2022, the Social Research and Planning Council team implemented a survey to capture the characteristics of household food insecurity in both Perth County and Huron County, as well as Stratford and St. Mary's. We had a lot of community partners that supported us in this, and because of that, we were able to analyze 740 surveys to understand the financial constraints that people are facing. And I'm going to share some of the data that was analyzed, the data that was analyzed in the findings today. So food insecurity is inadequate or insecure access to food due to financial constraints. This means that people do not have money to spend on nutritious food. And oftentimes when people are struggling to purchase food, they already have difficulties paying for rent and other basic needs. In our survey, 27% of participants indicated that in the last 12 months, they sometimes did not have enough food to eat. And 9% said they often didn't have enough to eat. So this represents 33% of respondents facing moderate or severe food insecurity. only 3% of people felt that the income met their everyday needs. And within our survey, the main source of household income for the majority of respondents was full-time employment. So 62% of people who face food insecurity in our survey are actually full-time employed. So this demonstrates that the wages in our region are not sufficient to meet basic needs. And that is why the living wage is so important. So just so that we are on common terminology again, I want to just clarify what the living wage is. So that is an hourly, it's broken down to an hourly wage that a worker needs to earn in order to cover their basic necessities. So that could be food, housing, utilities, childcare, transportation. And it's just meant to cover the basics and not additional things such as creating savings or paying for debt, anything like that. The United Way does calculate the living wage on an annual basis, and it's based upon research of actual costs in our region. So this year it was calculated at $20.70 per hour. And unfortunately, that's really reflective of sometimes the previous year, or at least the first 6 months of the year, because we can only use it data that's already been collected to calculate that. So here we asked them what are the expenses in their day-to-day life that's impacting their food budget. So, and what's kind of reducing their budget that they have to put towards food. So we do know that when somebody is experiencing food insecurity, they're already struggling to cover basic living expenses. And people do cover fixed expenses such as rent or mortgage, hydro and heat before paying for food because food can be flexible. So we found that 88% of people have sacrificed their food budget to pay for other living expenses. And the most common expense that reduced food budget is rent or mortgages, with 67% of respondents saying that, followed by transportation at 59% and utilities at 59%. So we know that people with low incomes are struggling to pay for rent and the bills and food. When asked if people had to cut the size of a meal or skip meals because there was not enough money to buy food, 33% indicated that this happened almost every month. When asked if people have ever gone a day without eating because there was not enough money to buy food, 19% said it happened almost every month, and 20% said it happened some months. And then we also asked the same about their children. And the numbers are different because we know that whenever possible, parents and family members will sacrifice and skip food or reduce the size of their meals so that their children don't have to suffer. But 9% of participants said that they had to cut the size of their children's meals, or their children had to skip a meal almost every month because there wasn't enough money. 12% said that this happened some months, and 3% said their children had to go an entire day without food almost every month. 7% said that their children had to go a whole day without food some months. So this is really sad information to know about our region. We also asked people about if they are participating in any community food programs. So community food programs can be food boxes, community meal programs, food banks, food pantries. And 50% said that they had never used any community food programs. And this is actually very consistent with other national studies. There's national studies that show that most severely food insecure households do not report using a food bank, for example. And data from 2015 to 2016 suggests that up to 7 times more people living in food insecure households than those accessing food banks. So we know that food banks are often the last resort for people to obtain food. Most people ask for financial help from friends or family, or will miss a payment on something before they use a food bank. And food banks are only one strategy employed by families that are running short on money to purchase food. So we know that people don't see that as a solution, and it isn't. It's an emergency measure. I also just want to share some information about going back to the point that 62% of people are full-time employed that face food insecurity. And our research shows that 81% of the most common jobs in Perth and Huron are below $25 an hour. And then from some research that we have completed, along with Ontario Living Wage Network, we do know that living wages do help improve the overall quality of life in a community. When people are paid adequately, they have improved nutrition and better health, but they also no longer have the stress of having to choose between paying rent and covering the cost of things such as groceries or dental bills. And it lifts people out of poverty by giving them economic security. We do know that all of our communities benefit when people receive a living wage because the engagement within the community increases too. So some of the recommendations that came out of our report here are connect to what you as a municipality can do. You can advocate for federal and provincial government policies and programs to ensure that there's an adequate income for all Canadians. And this could be through a basic income program, social assistance rates that are indexed to inflation, or providing a living wage rather than a minimum wage. Also, as a municipality and as an employer, you can certify as a living wage employer and also encourage local businesses to as well. And direct them to United Way if anybody has any questions about what that program is and what it entails, and be happy to help. You can also organize or volunteer at local income tax filing clinics. So we're reaching that time of year, and there should be releases on the media soon about tax filing clinics near you. And that's important because if people don't file with Canada Revenue Agency, the federal government is not able to provide them those income payments that they receive. So it's really, really crucial that low-income families are actually filing their taxes. And we can help by promoting that and spreading awareness about it. And you can also offer additional free sports or recreation activities to families in your area to maintain that healthy lifestyle and make sure that people are feeling a part of their community and ease the stress off of their budget by allowing them those opportunities. And I'm happy to entertain any questions from the council if there are any at this time, or please feel free to reach out to me at any time. And there's my contact information. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kristen. I'm sure there may be some questions. Anybody? Maybe I'm guessing wrong. The living wage,
Yes.
that's based on full-time employment or also on part-time?
We calculate it based upon a 35-hour work week. So we calculate all the different costs, and then it's distilled down to what that hourly wage would be if you're working 35 hours a week.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. That's any other time when we've had a presentation, that question's always come up. So I'm disappointed that nobody else asked it this time.
Maybe I've overwhelmed you with information. Numb.
Any other questions for United Way here? Councillor Fournier?
I do have a couple of questions regarding local initiatives surrounding food security.
Mhm.
But, I think they, upon second reflection, they would take up too much time. I will email you later. so I
Excellent.
can ask
Yes.
them.
I look forward to it.
Deputy Mayor Jankowski?
Yep. Yes, thank you, Your Worship, through you. Kristen, I was just curious, has there been any thought about skills upgrading for people? Like I noticed you've mentioned the living wage,
Mhm.
offering a higher wage to people, but just wondering where skills upgrade might help, or it might fit into the picture for people to, instead of having to be able to advance their skills and then advance their way through the workforce. What thought has been put into that? Thanks.
That is an important component of services that are offered in our community, and something that can be offered. There are grants in place. So through Centers for Employment and Learning or Conestoga Career College, if people access those services, there are ways in order to have that skills upgrade paid for. And then you can still be eligible to collect some of those income supports while you do that. But interestingly enough, in pilots that have been done about a basic income, in the past. So that's everybody has like an income floor that they receive. And if you're above it, then you don't receive payments for the government. However, if you're below that, then the government ensures that everybody has that wage. In those pilots, people maintain their employment status. It wasn't a deterrent to working. And the people that did not continue working full-time, many of them chose the option of upgrading their skills because they recognized that this was an opportunity to do even better. And it really is important and demonstrates how giving people that the ability to do something like that, to have the option of earning a better income, is is often very attractive to people. That's why sometimes some of those workplace support programs too, where you can work full-time and do skills upgrading in the evenings or weekends, can be a really great alternative as well.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I guess my second comment, Kristen, was like Perth County operates the PC Connect system, and the reports that we receive from the Perth County staff indicate that that is a useful way to help people with their mobility through lowering the cost of transportation, but providing that availability option to people. So I was just curious how broadly advertised that service is through the community. Like we have the service, and now we just have to let people know that it's there so that they can take advantage of it.
Absolutely. I do know that one of the reasons why our living wage is the rate that it is, it's because it's for Perth and Huron, and PCO Connect doesn't link every single community, but it is an important factor and a major factor because rural families, if you don't have that public transportation, then it does require that each working person does have access to transportation, such as a car, which drives up the cost of living in our area. So it is extremely important, and getting that message out there about the service that's there. If it's not well utilized, then the opportunities for it to expand to new communities is not there either. So certainly at United Way, we're very happy to have those services for some of the residents in the area that we cover, and it is an important option to offer to residents and also for a resident attraction.
Councillor Vink.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor McKenzie. What role does United Way play specifically in the supportive housing space in here in Perth?
So we are working on a number of different projects that would try to get supportive housing off the ground. So we have a new initiative called the Community Renewal Company, where we're actively seeking opportunities to engage with other community sectors and stakeholders to increase or create a supply of supportive housing in our community, recognizing that it does require a lot of upfront initial injections of income in order to do that. But we've supported a lot of municipalities to put in applications to federal, usually federal, but sometimes provincial programs, grants to get that seed money to have those projects happen, as well as we are learning about other models in communities such as Toronto, where United Ways have worked with healthcare providers and hospitals and used public health money to look at building supportive housing, because it does, in the end, reduce the pressure off of healthcare and is more financially, it's a lower financial cost to the system than healthcare for people to receive those services. So we're actively seeking opportunities or partnerships to build supportive housing. And then our main role right now is really to talk about supportive housing, what it is, and the need for it in the community, because some of those people that are on the by name list and those housing enumeration studies are people who, in order to maintain that stability, require those services, or else they may end up in a precariously housed position or experiencing homelessness again without those services on site to keep them safe.
Could I follow up, Walter? So did I understand correctly that you would support and help us apply for this federal accelerated housing fund that's about to open up?
Absolutely.
Great.
We're looking for opportunities. My role is with the Social Research and Planning Council is to gather some of the data, and there are opportunities. I can't remember the terminology of it, but really if you have that plan, which is the data in place to show what your current need is and your forecasted need for housing supply. So we're looking for the Social Research and Planning Council, how we can work with Perth County, Huron County to collect that data to support those applications. And we do have a team member, Mitchell Rhodes, who, because he's so connected to housing. He has attended the seminars and would be happy to answer questions because he's been learning more about the program which will launch, I believe, in July. Yeah. We'd love to help you because we want to see that supportive housing built.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, Kristen, I want to thank you very much. As you can tell, we're very interested,
Mhm.
so I do thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, next up is the Perth County Stewardship Project, and we have Sarah Franklin from Perth County with us, as well as Mel Looms, who was the consultant. So Sarah, looks like you must be the spokesman at the start. Or Mel, I don't care. The floor is yours.
Okay. Well, good evening, West Perth Council and Mayor Mackenzie. We're really pleased to be here this evening to provide you with a brief update and overview of the Perth County Stewardship Project. Oh, there we go. For those I haven't had the opportunity to meet, my name is Sarah Franklin. I am the Communications Officer with Perth County, and I'm joined this evening with Mel Limas, who is our Principal Consultant from Headlands Ag Enviro Solutions, who's been our primary operator on this project. As a bit of background, we started this project with the goal to develop a program that would support residents in their efforts to protect the soil, water, and air across Perth County. And our approach has been to listen and gather the input from the community, understand the best practices, as well as incorporate them into whatever we develop, but ultimately making sure we develop a Made in Perth County program. And community engagement has been a big part of this. Many of you, I know, attended some of our sessions or participated in the survey that we circulated. One of our initial efforts was to create a project landing page. perthcounty.ca/stewardship is still the location where you can find all of the project details and information. And this became a really helpful tool for us to communicate all of the opportunities for community engagement and research. We also hosted 5 community engagement sessions as well as an online survey, and Mel has been on the phone constantly with one-on-one interviews, which she's going to tell you a little bit more about coming up right now.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, in total, it's been over 270 people so far. And during the course of this project, I moved 200 meters into Perth County. So it's been a great way to connect with my own new community. So in the input sessions, especially, I heard, like, please connect with Amish and Mennonite communities, which I have. Please connect with agribusiness, which I have. Local service clubs, which I did. And there's still just so many more people. I still haven't even talked to 1% of Perth County population. But I hope I got a general, a good overview, I would hope. So yeah, what did we hear? A lot. It's very varied perspectives, but tree planting was by far the most important thing to everyone. They were pretty concerned with a low level of tree cover here in Perth County, although that does vary across different municipalities. As well, we heard composting programs. They would love to have that in settlement areas, green spaces, bike paths, and demonstration farms for conservation assistance and connection with existing funding programs, I think was also really important. When we asked what are the barriers, why aren't we doing something already? Economics is part of it, but there was also, I don't even know, people would say, I don't even know what I need to be doing on my farm. So I would love to have some advice and some connection with existing grant programs. Soil and Crop Improvement Association already has, is connecting farmers with provincial and federal dollars. So there's a way of leveraging other funding in Perth County in a more meaningful way. So that's something that we heard. But yeah, as for tree planting, that was by far the most important thing. And I also did a broad look across the world even. And there's several other ways that we could do things. I looked at the conservation authorities and the counties directly around us here. And we definitely have some best practices from that, but I want to look even further afield. So in the report that I'm pulling together right now, it does list a whole host of different ideas that might be maybe not for right away, but definitely for the future. And timeline, strangely enough, we are on time. It's rare, but I had a pretty aggressive timeline because I wanted to make sure I had farmers' perspectives before we went back in the fields. And as of last week, we started planting, so I think we got it done. So yeah, at this point, we've presented to the Agricultural Committee, and they have a rough idea and gave me feedback on what are the most important things. So the next steps is really hammering that out and putting dollars to it, and eventually a report that'll go back to County Council.
Yeah, so as Mel mentioned, we're toward the tail end of the research and pulling together all of this information. We're in the midst of presenting to all of the lower tier councils across Perth County. And we're going to refine the input that we've received and the feedback from the Agricultural Working Group, which is a committee of County Council. And ultimately, they will receive a presentation that's more well formulated into phases, some costing involved as to what this could look like to roll out in a sustainable fashion. And from there, this committee will make an endorsement and recommendation to County Council, who will be responsible for approving the next steps. So I just want to thank everyone again for the time out of your busy meeting tonight to talk about this project, but we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you. Questions for anybody here? Nicholas, you look like you want to ask a question, but you're not sure.
You mentioned costing as one of the tasks that you have. Is there any thought put to no cost solution that somehow with funding from federal, provincial, and maybe carbon credits that the program can be funded by itself without burden of taxpayers? So we get the benefit of the program, but then we also don't have to fund it through a levy.
Yes, so through the mayor, that is definitely under consideration. We're aware that there are a number of different grant programs available for all different types of stewardship activities. So it will partly be informed by what we decide to pursue in the early stages of this and what pursuing those funding opportunities looks like. Obviously, applying for funding, sort of cross your fingers and hope you get it. But with this being a new program, we'd certainly look to be leveraging those dollars that are available as much as possible to either fund the startup of a program like this or grow it going forward. So absolutely.
May I follow up, Mayor McKinley? Yeah. Is there any also consideration to coordinate this stewardship with the climate action employee that Perth County has, that person could have a dual role supporting both initiatives?
Yes, thank you. Through the mayor, bang on. Absolutely. There's definitely both of these items can work well together. Understanding that we want to move forward on some of the actions coming out of the greenhouse gas reduction plan. That climate change position is something that was approved at County Council for this budget year. So we're looking at ways to how we can reasonably incorporate it so that not only the goals of a stewardship program get accomplished, but we're also moving forward on what the true nature of that position, which was moving forward on the greenhouse gas program as well. So certainly under consideration and everything's on the table. So.
Okay, good. Any other questions? Well, I want to thank both Mel and Sarah for coming tonight. Oh, did you have a question? I'm sorry. I don't always look this way, and even when Dean has his hand up, I don't always see it. So if you have a question, go right
Well,
ahead.
it was more of a comment to thank Sarah and Mel for their hard work on this initiative. I'm speaking, I guess, from my position as the chair of the Perth County Agricultural Working Group Committee. So what we're trying to do is trying to develop a countywide initiative, and these are the first small steps towards that initiative. So I guess it would be fair to say this will not be the last time this item will be discussed at this council table. So thanks again for your continued hard work, and we'll move forward. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you for coming. Okay, moving on then. We do have a delegation from the Perth County Federation of Agriculture. And we have, I'm not sure who the spokesman is. I see, looks like it must be Sarah. And we do have Sarah Wood, Joanne Foster, Eric McLagan, and Pete Ninus here this evening. So Sarah, I'll turn it over to you and you can delegate whatever goes on here.
Thank you, Mayor. So good evening, everyone. My name is Sarah Wood, and I am a director with the Ontario Federation of Agriculture, but also a local director with the Perth County Federation of Agriculture. And tonight we're here to introduce ourselves to you and council so that we can work on building that relationship. So when there's hard conversations that need to happen in the future, we can have that open dialogue instead of the back and forth that could potentially happen. So with me tonight, I'll let them introduce themselves.
Good evening, everybody. Some may know you and some may know me and some of you don't. But now, my name is Joanne Foster and my husband and I farm in West Perth as well as South Perth and Osborne, South Huron in Huron County. We live on the family farm and we are grain farmers.
Good evening, I'm Ed McLean. I live in a dairy farm in Logan Township. West Perth.
I'm Pete Ninos, farm with my family on swine, and we do 3-way rotation: beans, corn, and wheat. Right. We represent 1,800 family farms members, and we've been working for farmers for 79 years. And aim to work proactively on issues faced by its members and the possibility of opportunities within Perth County. Farmers become members of PCFA when they reside in Perth County and join OFA as members.
Thank you. Technology works when it's great. So OFA, what's OFA and what's the relationship between OFA and Perth Federation? So OFA lobbies on behalf of 38,000 farm families in Ontario, and we are independent of the government, but all 3 general farm organizations, OFA, NFU, and CFFO, are regulated under the Farm Registration and Farm Organization Funding Act. So OFA values our working relationship with the Western and Eastern Wardens Caucus and work to have continual discussion and dialogue. OFA develops policy that originates from our local grassroots members and extensive research with the team that we have that work for us. Policies are an example of where OFA and PCFA can work collaboratively, but we're independent. And a really great example of that was OFA's stance on the wind turbine issue and PCFA's stance that no wind turbines back 12 years ago now. So they can be independent, but we can also work together. We provided in your package that you received, as I see Councillor Trentowski's opened it up, there is an Ag Matters guide with all the information on different municipalities, the amount of money that goes into municipalities from farmers in your local communities, a background on our policies and other resources. There's also a copy of the Real Dirt on Farming in there, a really large project that the Perth County Federation took on this past year. They bought 2,800 of those Real Dirt on Farming magazines, and every kid in Perth County in grade 6, 7, or 8 that goes to not only the Catholic board, but the public board received a copy of that. So that was a great project that funded between PCFA and OFA. OFA is governed by a board of 18 elected directors, 15 zones, and then 3 directors at large. So in Perth and Huron, you're lucky that you have 3 provincial directors from Perth and Huron. We felt that we are a ag central location and needed to have that represented at the provincial level. Next, try this. There we go. So the homegrown campaign. Who has seen the homegrown campaign? Who knows what it is? Yeah? No? No? Okay. So it's an initiative by the OFA, and our stance that agriculture land is finite. It's not, we can't recreate anymore. We're not growing more. It's something that we need to protect and make sure that we're able to produce enough food so that our citizens never have to worry where their food's going to come from. We don't have to be in a situation such as COVID, where other countries who do not produce enough food were reliant on countries that do produce enough food. So we want to make sure that the land is protected so that can continue for years to grow. And we want to produce food, fiber, and fuel. Currently in Ontario, we produce over 200 different commodities on the land, but we are losing 319 acres to different forms, whether people are taking it out to put buffer strips, thanks Mel, or if they're going into development, all different types, but that's where we're losing most of it. Most of it is class 1, 2, and 3 farmland, but the campaign, if you log on to homegrown.ofa.on.ca, there's over 70,000 signatures, and we've been tracking it through the resource company that we work with, and a lot of them aren't farmers. There's a lot of citizens that are getting really worried about where their food's coming from. The other nice thing is when you sign on, you get an email once a month that tells you what local foods is being grown, what's being raised right now, what's popular in growing season.
So on this slide, we have the differences. It shows how PCFA, which is Perth County Federation, works with Ontario Federation of Agriculture. So we both do our own thing, but we also work together. So Perth County, and I've helped with some of this, was the rural the books that we gave out to the kids, the Real Dirt on Farming, and I went out and I helped deliver some of those, some of them in South Perth and West Perth, I believe. And so, as you can see from the diagram, they're both of these are independent and collaborative items that both of our PCFA and OFA focus our attention on. The past fall, like Sarah said, PCFA distributed over 2,400 Real Dirt on Farming magazines to 28 schools in Perth County, as well as the guides for the teachers. And I did learn something going to the schools. I didn't know that they were all locked up and nobody can walk up and get into them anymore like they used to. I guess my kids all got older and didn't have to go through that phase. Anyhow, other activities, Perth County Federation has been proud to have had and hosted, which I'm sure some of you have been to, was the Harvest Gala, which we have in the fall. And some of you have attended the Spring Forum. So this is where we bring farm commodity reps in and some of our local political people, and we discuss stuff for agriculture and our local political people, and we bring our concerns forward, and they take our concerns forward as well.
Okay. And so then that's kind of an overview of what we do together from what I talked about and what Joanne had talked about. So how can you get a hold of us? So ofa.on.ca, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, there's Twitter, all different platforms for Ontario Federation. Perth County Federation also has their own website with their county issues, and how you can contact them and get a hold of their directors on there is also there. They also have a Facebook and Twitter, and those are great opportunities, and how they've used it is they've promoted different things, but they've also talked about their directors and what their directors are doing through the year and years.
So I just like to thank you for the time today, and so please feel free to reach out to us when any questions or opportunities related to agriculture or locally. We want to work collaboratively to strengthen our local community.
Okay, now there's a document that came to someone and it's a video. Can you play that now? Is that okay? So this video was a project that Perth County Federation applied for funding through OFA and worked together, and they had 6 commodity groups work with them.
Perth County is a wonderful place to farm and to live. There's so much available here.
Perth County's farming is so diverse. There's all kinds of commodities that are here, whether it's beef, chicken, grain farmers, egg farmers.
It's a good climate for cows, for crops, and it's a really good network of people to support our business.
We all work well together to provide high quality food to families throughout the world.
We care about the products that we grow to feed to the animals we raise, to put on the shelf for families.
We eat, sleep, and breathe cows. Like it's really our passion.
You just want to get out to the barn and see all the newborn pigs out there and care for them.
We're part of something bigger. We're part of a bigger network of people that are serving an even bigger group.
It's just all different kinds of people doing what we know and we love to feed other families. I guess it's just something that's in our blood.
Okay, so at this time, if there's any questions for us, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, any questions for Sarah? Councilor Fournier.
I don't mean this to sound critical, but I'm going to read something first and then I'm going to ask you a question, okay? And this is regarding agricultural workers. You are not entitled to minimum wage, daily and weekly limits on hours of work, daily rest periods, time off between shifts, weekly, bi-weekly rest periods, eating periods, 3-hour rule, overtime pay, public holidays or public holiday pay, or vacation with pay. Now, my question is sort of 2 parts. 1, why do I not hear reformed agricultural worker law ever mentioned when the OFA publishes? I've never seen it mentioned in any OFA publications. You talk an awful lot about the 750,000 Ontarians that are employed by the agricultural sector, but then you immediately switch over to 38,000 family farms without any mention of the 700,000 some other people. To put it slightly more directly, I've never quite been able to figure out why an industry that relies on employment rules like this deserves any help from the government. And I was hoping you might be able to answer why rules like this exist, because, pardon me for mentioning one other thing, but from studying history, slave owners in Republican Rome weren't allowed to do this. So if you don't mind.
Okay, so what I can talk to is the temporary foreign worker program that is regulated by the government. Those workers are required, and the employer is required to follow minimum wage standards. They are also required to pay for their travel to and from their country of origin. They are required to have X number of days of holidays, just as any other Ontario citizen is required who works under the force. The challenge that comes is the temporary foreign worker program is federal. There is a provincial one. They both overlap. They both have those same standards. What comes down to the housing standards part of it is dealt with by municipalities. Those standards are dealt with by the municipalities.
I was specifically referencing Ontario agricultural law and not foreign workers, not temporary workers, just regular agricultural workers. I have the page pulled up right here, actually. And this is for what I was referring to. This applies to you if you work on a single farm, growing or producing eggs, milk, grain, seeds, fruit, vegetables, mushrooms, maple products, honey, tobacco, herbs, pigs, cattle, sheep, goats, poultry, deer, elk, ratites, bison, rabbits, game birds, wild boar, and cultured fish. That's the rules I was just mentioning, nothing to do with temporary or foreign.
Okay, so as an employer who has farm employees, I am required. There is no overtime hours on a farm. We are exempt from overtime maximum hours, but we are capped at 60 hours per week on those farms. All those farmers, all those employees still are required to have WSIB. They are required to have holidays. They are required to pay minimum wage.
I would suggest that perhaps, if you want to carry this conversation further with the OFA, I don't think this is probably the opportunity to do it at a council meeting. So I would encourage you to follow up on that, but maybe follow up with the OFA.
Apologies, too much of a question for now. Thank you.
Any other questions for our group here? Okay. Oops, sorry. Who am I not seeing now? Oh, sorry, Dean.
Sorry, your worship, it's me again. I need to wear a brighter colored suit, I think, or something, but no, I just, I've attended the spring forum. It was very informative. I wanted to ask if I had permission to talk about that in more detail as a report to council in the future. That was my first question.
So yes, you can. The three briefs that were brought up by the Federation of Agriculture are approved to be shared widely. We have reached out to the commodity groups because that is their information, and we have heard back from most of them. And so all those documents, yes, will be able to be shared.
Okay, so yeah, because I attended on behalf of West Perth Council, I was going to prepare a brief as a high level view of what was discussed in the comments and so forth. But being as you're here, I guess what I wanted to ask is if you had a top 3 list of, like you mentioned, farmland preservation. So that would be, all right, so top 4, farmland preservation being one. What are 3 other top of mind issues that right now that concern Perth County Federation of Agriculture?
So yeah, carbon tax is one that's being worked on both provincially and locally. So Bill C-234 has just been, it's the carbon tax that would exempt carbon tax from farmers on animal housing and on farm drying, because when the first carbon tax bill went through, it only exempted farmers from their fuel that was used on farm. So that is sitting in the Senate and we're waiting on that. That is one of them. Another issue is broadband and cellular service. So there is work between the local federation and the provincial federation, pushing the provincial government to ensure that those citizens, and OFA speaks on behalf of the farmers because that is our members, but we do live and work in rural Ontario. And so it's important to us. And it was brought up to our attention from a local vet that if he's on a call or he has a farmer call him and is talking to him and his cell service drops, that can be detrimental. And the largest part to that on top of that is 911 services. So if you're in a farm and you don't have access to cell service availability and an emergency happens, you're left without the option to access 911 services. So broadband, cellular service, carbon, land preservation, and then property tax is always one to discuss. Yeah, so not all of us have Quadro. Now there is lots of broadband projects going on. It just got pulled down our road at home, so I'm really thankful to finally have broadband to run our chicken barn off of, but those are some issues.
Okay. Nicholas, go ahead.
How do we, thank you, Mayor McKenzie. How do we as a council or municipality work together with OFA and the provincial government on collaborating on the next provincial policy statement?
So when we had, before your elections happened, we had Emily Sousa with the OFA come in and talk about land planning and land preservation. Right now, there is an EBR posting open about the provincial policy statement and the fact that they want to put the provincial policy statement and the Grow Ontario strategy together. So OFA and PCFA will be submitting a response to the government about some of the challenges that we see for not only our farmers, but our rural communities, because a lot of those changes in the PPS will affect our rural communities and counselors like yourselves, but also across the county. So I would encourage you to look at that EBR posting and as a council, send in a response to some of the challenges that you see that are going to affect you. And if you need help, please reach out to the OFA. We have a really great land use planning resource at our hands. And the better we can use it to make things better for all of rural Ontario, the better off we all are.
Okay, one last look around. Don't see any questions. So I do want to thank you for coming and for your presentation. Thank you very much. Okay, all right. Okay, we're going to move on. We do have one delegation, and I'm not sure if she's going to come tonight or not, but she did say she would be late. So we'll just carry on with our agenda, and if they do come, we'll work them in at some point later on this evening. So brings us down to reports, and the first one is the planning department. And we do have a zoning amendment to incorporate surplus farmhouse severance policies into the West Perth zoning bylaw. And Jerica is going to fill us in on that one. So go ahead.
Sorry. Yes, thank you, Council. I'm very pleased to bring this to you tonight. So housekeeping amendments are municipal initiated zoning bylaw amendments. So council is usually familiar with site-specific zoning bylaw amendments. Housekeeping amendments are used for a variety of purposes, such as cleaning up potential errors in the existing zoning bylaw, or in this case, to incorporate policy changes. So this housekeeping amendment has been proposed to all four municipal councils in Perth County. For those who were on council previously, you folks kind of got a soft launch. It was initially presented in 2021. Due to staff capacity, it was just left sitting for a moment, but we're back at it tonight to present council with options for surplus farm dwelling severances, primarily the residential lots. Oh, how did I end this slideshow? There we go. Okay. So a bit of background in 2021, at that point in time, Perth County had been doing surplus farm dwelling severances for about 4 years. We started doing them in 2017. Surplus farm dwelling severances, of course, are when a residence is deemed surplus to a farm operations needs, and they are severed from the retained farmland. The official plan amendment was initiated in part because of comments from the public. Certain property owners and community members in Perth County wanted to see more uses contemplated on the severed residential lot of surplus farm dwelling severances. Additionally, the Land Division Committee that is responsible for assessing many of our severance applications requested some clarifications. So OPA 189 addressed quite a few things in the official plan policies for surplus farm dwelling severances. But two major changes that affect what we're going to be talking about tonight is that it gave the authority for the lower tier municipalities and townships to contemplate in their local zoning bylaws limited non-commercial raising of livestock as an accessory use, and also vocational uses such as trades or artists in accessory dwellings or accessory structures. My apologies. Okay, let me see if I did it. So what you're seeing on the screen right now is what the A-1 zone is currently in the West Perth zoning bylaw. So in Perth County, we don't rezone the residential portions into a residential zone. They stay within the agricultural zone, but they get a special provision that restricts the lot to residential uses only. At the same time, we rezone the farmland so that there's only agricultural cropland permitted, no livestock facilities or anything like that. So what we're presenting tonight is options for council to consider for revising the zoning bylaw to kind of expand and provide clarifications on for the uses on those lots. And to request that staff move forward with obtaining public feedback. So the first one, and one that has been getting some interesting comments, is the non-commercial raising of livestock, which is currently permitted in the official plan. And so it's a new definition that will be going into section 3. And the policy goal is to allow residents of the sever residential lot of SFD severances the opportunity to have livestock animals for either transportation and or food production for just their personal use. So while we're considering this, it can be kind of complicated because we have a variety of reasons for having animals on lots in Perth County. Our big one that we are most familiar with is agricultural. So these are commercial operations and livestock facilities for income generation. We also have domestic pets. They're regulated by municipal bylaws. And what we're proposing now is that the potential to have animals that are used non-commercially, so they can't be sold or given away to other members off the lot, but can be used by the family members for food security or what have you. It can be complicated because sometimes the same animal can fit into all 3 categories. So we have tried to kind of create the bylaw in such a way that we're not addressing farm occupations or farm livestock raising. So the definition will be animals, non-commercial, and we loop it back around to the definition for that's already existing in the zoning bylaw for livestock. The reason for doing so is we want to avoid any bylaws that intersect with pet bylaws. Especially in the agricultural zone, we put a limit on dogs and kennels. So that will not be affected by this. This is just for animals that are regularly considered to be livestock, but it's a little confusing at times. But once you kind of get onto the purpose, they're not commercial animals. So it will be a new accessory use for the A1 zone that is being proposed as an option. And there's 2 nutrient units proposed to help with bylaw regulation. When this amendment was proposed, something that was heard from local staff, especially those who provide enforcement, that they kind of wanted some form of hard numbers. So the nutrient units was kind of a way to start to get that numbers piece in along with the non-commercial access, accessory residential use. So I'm going to provide a few numbers just to give you references. Nutrient units for horses. These tend to get scarier as I go along the presentation. Large frame, you just have 1 permitted. Smaller, medium frame, 2, 4. As we go through cattle, there's slightly more permitted depending on the type. Now, this is usually where folks get a little concerned because 300 chickens is a lot of chickens. I do want to note that this is going to be in combination with the point that it's meant to be accessory to the residential use. It's going to be very difficult for a resident to claim that they need 1,000 pullets for their residential use or 300 laying hens. And also there's other provincial regulation that kicks in like quota. Moving on from there, another additional use that is being proposed is home industries. So this is the policy goal for this is to support economic diversity and enable small scale business opportunities within the municipality. So home industry definition includes trade, small manufacturing, and or artistic study. This is a new definition. We already have one in the zoning bylaw for home occupations. The main difference between a home industry and a home occupation is that a home occupation happens within the primary residence of the lot. Home industries would be able to happen in an accessory structure. So if you have a storage shed, a garage, something of that nature. And usually the reason for them being located in these buildings is because they're generally a little messier and you don't want them in your house, like say a woodworking or painter studio or something of that nature. So once again, there's going to be a new definition proposed and a new accessory use in the A1 zone. In addition, there's going to be sections under the general provision section of the bylaw to help regulate the uses. So the criteria will basically focus around keeping it small scale. So it has to be accessory to the main residential use, can't be the primary use of the lot. There can't be any external evidence. There's no outdoor storage of goods, materials, or equipment unless you screen them. It's not meant to create nor become a nuisance or hazard to the neighbors. We're proposing that not more than 2 persons are employed. A retail store is not permitted. And I have gotten questions on clarification on what a retail store is. The difference between it doesn't limit folks from, say, purchasing items and making appointments to arrange to pick up said items from the lot. But a retail store is a place where customers can come and go at will to view goods during certain set business hours. So there's no storefront, there's no display of goods that are visible on the lot, no traffic issues being generated from people going in and out. And there's a maximum size proposed of 450 square meters. In addition to those 2 kind of major new definitions, we're offering to provide some clarification to what can happen on the A1 zone lot. So something that happens during the rezoning process often is that for severed lots, we try to keep them to a minimum size as possible. In order to do so, sometimes we have a reduced lot frontage because we just want to capture the driveway and we don't want to capture the land on the other side. So instead of having a bunch of A1.56, how many there are, like special provision to the special provision, allowing that the lot area and lot frontage will be dictated by the severance, will just make the bylaw a bit cleaner without having a whole bunch of exceptions that have already kind of been accounted for as part of the surplus farm dwelling severance process. There's also new yard requirements that are kind of amalgamation of the agricultural zone and the rural residential zone. That will only apply to new development on the lot. So say someone wants to build a new accessory structure, or sometimes we see 5 years down the road, the house is being pulled down, they want to put on a new house. That's when those yard requirements would come in. Existing structures would likely be accounted for during the rezoning application. So that's my presentation for tonight. I'm looking forward to receiving feedback from council, and we're looking forward to moving forward through the process to obtain public consultation if that's what you wish to direct staff to do. So thank you.
Thank you, Jerica. Just before I ask for questions, so normally land division puts a stipulation on, like if there's a shed that's going to go with the house or an abandoned barn, say, we always put the stipulation of no livestock. So that'll have to be tweaked a bit as well, wouldn't it?
So the non-commercial animals still have to meet MDS requirements, and there still is not going to be any livestock facilities permitted on the retained farmland or the existing farmland, just because they generally can't meet the MDS. this is really more just meant to be for, like, say if someone wants 5 chickens or a little pony for the kids, or quite a few of our residents in parts of Perth County are Mennonite Amish and rely on horses for transportation. So when this change was contemplated, it was really seen as kind of like an equity issue in certain regards. Does that make sense, Mayor McKenzie?
Questions from other members of council? Councillor Foster?
If you're talking about horse and buggy Mennonites, wouldn't you be restrictive saying only one large horse when you normally use a team of at least 2?
Yes, I think that what we're hearing from just the other 3 councils is that the nutrient units might need to be tweaked and potentially another option explored for regulation of that. But it was something I thought about. I don't actually know how many horses would you need for a draw team, but we just figured, yeah. Thank you.
It only applies if it's a severed surplus farmhouse, and we don't get a lot of severances from the Amish community. So,
Well, the other thing I would offer is that you're likely going to get wagon horses, so it's going to be 2. Like you could have a pair of wagon horses, but not a team of Clydesdales, because that's and that's where I think you're going to find that it is the right balance. Because if you are living in a surplus farmhouse and you want it as an accessory and you need a team, that's not the right place for a team. That's what the policy is trying to get at. But a pair of wagon horses to get around, you're fine. And it's not a policy issue for this municipality, but they're good. They're ones we have to think about. I don't think we have any non-car Mennonites in our community, but it is certainly coming up in the others, I'm certain.
okay. Nicholas, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor McKenzie. Could you please clarify retail versus farm gate sales? And do those 2 overlap each other or 2 separate?
I think it's something that's going to be rectified in the new official plan, because farm stands are oftentimes seen as on-farm diversified uses. The thought experiment definitely did come up during our discussions as a team, like what if someone's like selling produce from their garden type things. I think the difference there is it's of a seasonal nature and usually on such a small scale. Now, could we see scenarios where it grows to such a scale where it might, say, cause a nuisance or hazard to like highway safety or something like that? If that's the case, then it might be that business has to relocate to a different lot that's appropriate for its use. So it's really about how small the uses are and whether or not they're accessory to the residents. Does that make sense?
And if I could follow up, what would public consultation look like for this process?
Great question. Generally what happens is there's a posting in the local newspapers. I think it's the Mitchell Banner that Mitchell Advocate. Oh, shoot, I'm mixing up my local newspapers. In addition, in addition to that, I'm sure West Perth staff would put it all on their our website and social media and stuff like that. And it's a very general, so it's kind of a general statement that goes onto the notices. And then residents would inquire to the planning department and provide their feedback. And I usually send them, so the materials that you saw tonight, I would send to them. And then anything else that we had that they had questions about. So that's normally how they unfold. They have to have, as per the Planning Act, at least 20 days of public notice. So whatever that circulation date, how that meets up with the council date. I'm anticipating that if West Perth Council decided to direct staff to move forward with public notice, we'd probably see this discussion come back in, say, August. Hopefully when it's less busy for the planting season and stuff like that.
Diane, you had a question?
For the Chicker Farmers of Ontario, it's a quoted system, so we might want to note in there that they can't have that many units. So we might want to just prefaces in it saying that you can't have 300 because of the quota system. And then my next question is there anything based on like lot size for these? Because you're giving them 2 nutrient units. If they only have half an acre, is that big enough to support 1 horse? Right? We almost need to regulate the number of animals based on the lot size.
Yes, thank you. That's a good comment too. The thought is that having them meet MDS setbacks would disqualify some of the smaller lots and give some of the bigger lots more wiggle room in that regard, but it is definitely to consider. And there has been concerns raised that they're, by making them stringent on MDS, that it might be too limiting for most of our surplus farm dwelling lots. So definitely still a question that needs to be answered.
My follow-up question is, could we tie this into our residential, like in Mitchell policy as well as in our Hamlet policies as well? Could we come up with a general policy saying you could have 5 chickens on a lot regardless of where you live in the municipality?
So through you, your worship, I forgot about that all today. So the answer is that it could be contemplated. It would probably be beyond the scope of this project. And I think I don't want to speak for other municipal staff. I know it has been a question that's been coming up. These policies would really only be for the A1 zone. In my mind, I hope that that would be a starting point to start to move some of these into these potential uses into other areas of the municipality where they are appropriate. The thought with the A1 zone is it kind of makes the most sense here, because you have these small rural residential lots in the countryside where they probably won't create concerns of nuisances, as opposed to in Mitchell, you have a lot more considerations over what that policy should look like based on the nature of the community that you're in, if that makes sense.
Okay, anyone else? I know common questions that I have received over the years on surplus farmhouses. You know, their kids go to school, the rest of the kids are in a 4-H club, or they want to have a horse. And up until now, we haven't allowed that. It might be still a little hard to have a 4-H calf if you don't have a proper building to put it in, and even the same with the horse, I suppose. But getting back to Diane's question, like most of these people that will have a horse are going to have to buy feed for it. They're not going to be able to grow hay, you know, to feed it, because they just won't have enough of land. So it's certainly an interesting concept that we're throwing out here, and something that people have been asking and wondering about for some time. Last call for any questions? Oh, go ahead, Doug. Sorry.
And it may be a stupid question. So when you say I can have it for self-sustaining food, right? So I could have a cow and a pig and 5 chickens, and no, because the units will add up, and then that, okay, just so it's clear.
Yeah. Okay, anybody else? All right, if there's no further questions, we do have a recommendation here, and I'll read that and then we'll see where it goes. So the recommendation is the council direct staff to circulate a notice of public meeting for a housekeeping zoning amendment for the purpose of receiving public feedback on the proposed amendments to the zoning provisions related to surplus farm severances in the West Perth zoning bylaw. We have a mover and seconder for that. Councillor Phelps, Councillor Fournier. Any further questions? All those in favor? Opposed, if any, that is carried. Okay. Moving on. We have a part lot control application. Jerick is going to do that as well. Jerica?
Yes, thank you, Mayor McKenzie. My apologies, I am not John Bice, who is the author of this report. I may not be as handsome, but hopefully I can get you through the planning policy just as well. So this is an application we don't always see in West Perth. So it's actually an exemption from part lot control. This is 1-2023. The owner is 2161453 Ontario Inc. With the agent being Carolyn Baker from Baker Planning Group. It is going to be located in the northern part of Mitchell, near Campbell Drive and St. George Street, now through the extension of Thames Avenue. And the surrounding land uses are residential in nature. So exemption from part lot control is, to kind of take a step back, part lot control is given to municipalities through section 50.5 of the Planning Act. And what we mean when we say part lot control is that the property owners, before they change property lines or interest in land, and when we talk about interest in land, we often mean easements over 21 years, right-of-ways, that type of thing, they have to obtain consent from the municipality. Now, another feature of the Planning Act is later in section 50.7, it allows a municipality to pass through bylaw a measure to temporarily lift part lot control from a subject piece of property for the purpose of expediting the placement of property lines. It's something that we don't use that often, but what it is very useful for is subdivisions that involve townhouses or semi-detached units. So there are other planning applications that have gone before that have public consultation, and the principle of development has been established. Another measure that we look for when staff are evaluating exemption from part lot control requests is whether construction has started on the units, because what we want to see is the dividing line between the townhouse or the semi put in place before the property lines are put in. And this is to ensure that we don't put a property line down and then the builder makes a small error and then the property line isn't on the center line. So in this case, it's 2 blocks. On each block, there will be 5 units of 1 block of street townhouses. So that will be part 1 through to 21. The other parts on the plan that you see are for maintenance easements. So for the residents who own the inner townhouse blocks to be able to access their backyards with equipment, and also servicing easements in interest of the municipality. So as you can see here, construction has started. They're probably getting close to their sale agreements. And that's the other side of the road. So through passing this bylaw, they'd have a year to get the lots registered. And the approval authority is going to be through Perth County. So assuming the municipality of West Perth wants to move forward with passing an exemption from part lot control bylaw, it will then go up to Perth County for final approval. So interesting application. If council has any questions, I'd be more than willing to answer them. And thank you for this presentation.
Thank you, Jerica. Questions on what we're doing? Everybody knows where this property is, I believe. The old Duracell property. Yeah. if there is no questions, and yeah, I've always kind of wondered about part lot control and lifting it, but it makes perfectly good sense why we're doing it. So I do have a recommendation here, and it is that the Council of Municipality of West Perth approve the application by Baker Planning Group for the exemption of part lot control on lands described as Plan 44M85, Blocks 1 and 2, further described as Parts 1 to 24 on Plan 44R 6075, Mitchell Ward in the Municipality of West Perth, and forward it to the County of Perth for approval. And we need a mover and seconder for that. Councillor O'Donnell and Councillor Foster. Any questions? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. Thank you, Jerry. All right, next up is our chief building official and the first quarter permit summary. So Bob, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Mayor McKenzie. We've encompassed January, February, and March permit issuance in this report, as well as the quarterly report. The reason we did this was a matter of convenience, I guess, for us, and not taking up council's valuable time on smaller reports. Any questions on the permits that have been issued so far?
Any questions for Bob? Okay.
Thank you. Residentially, on, if you want to roll down to the quarterly, yeah, thanks. Residentially, we're about half of where we were last year with permits for residential. Agricultural permits have really been maintaining the focus of the permit base, and that's reflected in our construction values. Permit numbers are down a little bit, but I'm not concerned about that. As you see by the report, January and February were slow. March has had quite an uptake, and April is the same.
Questions for Bob? Okay.
That's everything. Thank you.
That's got it. No questions. Just think here, we do have a recommendation that Municipality of West Perth receives the first quarter permit summary information report. Moved by Councillor Duck, seconded by Councillor Rose. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Thank you, Bob. All right, moving on. Next is our librarian, Rosemary, and library board meeting from March the 28th. So Rosemary, take her away.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. The board did meet on March 28th, and I believe you have the statistics report, the minutes, and the CEO quarterly report in front of you. Just very briefly, some highlights of that meeting. The library continues to accept non-perishable, individually wrapped snack donations for its snack sharing shelf. We've also approached many local businesses to see if they would like to donate to or sponsor that shelf, which is located within the library building. The board reviewed several policies for review, discussion, and approval. All library policies and plans are public documents, and as such, they're all posted on the library's website, the most recent versions available to anyone at any time. And finally, in accordance with the library's new strategic plan, which was passed by the board in January of this year, the library is very happy to offer community passes. And these are free admission passes, let's say, to various historical, cultural, and nature sites in and around Perth County. And because Deputy Mayor Trentowski was asking about PC Connect earlier this evening, I do want to give you a heads up that the county did approach all 5 public libraries in Perth County regarding offering free PC Connect bus passes to residents. So we are very happy to be able to do that very soon. They are hoping to encourage and increase their ridership, and the public libraries in Perth County are very happy to assist with that. I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Any questions for Rosemary on her report? Andrew?
Even though I was there, there is one thing, CEO quarterly highlights, that really stands out for me.
Yes.
What is Swedish death cleaning?
It's, yes, it was a program on decluttering, I suppose, in an extreme fashion. So that is just getting down to absolutely bare, what do you need? And what can you donate or discard? And I think the idea is that if you go down to absolute bare minimum of what you need, you can declutter not only your home, but your state of mind. It was very popular.
Any other questions?
Thank
Oh,
you so
sorry.
very much.
Any other questions for Rosemary? If not, the recommendation here is that Council Municipality of West Perth receives the library board meeting March 28, 2023 meeting information report. Mover and seconder for that, Councillor Chessel, Councillor Phelps, all those in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried. Thank you, Rosemary.
Thank you.
The next is the operation manager's report, and he's not with us tonight, but Jeff's going to update us on the tender with Huron County.
Sure. Thank you very much, Mayor McKenzie. I just want to mention that Operations Manager Mike Kramer is at the Good Roads Convention. I should mention as well, I don't think we mentioned it earlier, that that's where Councillor Harold is. So we'll be expecting a full and complete report on Councillor Harold's return with 5 minutes of mandatory questioning. On the road report, this is the boundary bridge that between West Perth and South Huron. The report is complete, came in a little under budget. We're providing it to you as an information report because the tender and the recommendation for approval came through South Huron. So the report's there for you. It's a bit of savings in that budget, and we have a recommendation that council receive the structure 030H replacement on Road 183 tender results for information.
Okay, and I do believe it was Huron County, not South Huron, that did the tender. I believe it was Huron County. Okay, so Jeff read the motion there. Do we have a mover and seconder for that? Councillor Rose, seconded by Councillor O'Donnell. Any further discussions on that? Nice to see something coming under budget. Councillor Foster?
Where does the extra money go back to? Like from being under budget?
So at this point in time, it'll just it'll sit in the budget. It's approved for now. It'll fall out in surplus stuff instead at the end of the year, but you can keep in mind a project like this in terms of other ones that come along to see if any go over and just see where we're at with how it levels up.
I did take the vote on that, didn't I? Yeah, I thought I did. Oh, I just did a mover and second. Okay, all in favor of that motion? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Sorry. All right, moving on then, Recreation Facilities and Parks Manager Darcy.
Thank you, Mayor McKenzie. Yeah, my first one is the activity report. It's all there in front of you. Tried to highlight most of the projects that are going on here shortly. Some of the highlighted ones, as well as I did want to mention that I think I noted in there, but the municipal office, but it has been very busy and we should be very proud of the amount of usage we've got of this building. Everything from job fairs to 90th birthdays to just meetings every week. So it's kept us very busy, but it's been a big success. So but I'll gladly take any questions on any of my activity report.
Okay, anything for Darcy on the activity part? Okay, don't see any hands going up. So the recommendation would be that municipality of West Perth receives the Recreation and Facilities Activity Information Report. Mover and seconder for that. Counselor Rose, Counselor Foster, all those in favor? Opposed, if any, that is carried. Okay, moving on.
Okay, next one is the vehicle procurement. So I highlighted it fairly good in the report, but I'll just do a quick highlight that this is a report looking to get a little bit more flexibility in our vehicle procurement. We are looking to procure 4 vehicles this year. They are listed at the end of the report and the upset limits. One of them is actually, only one of them is mine, but 3 of them were with Mike's. Mike has been consulted and he's on the same page as I am for this. It's just basically due to the short supply and the tough turnaround. I know Mayor McKenzie mentioned at the one budget meeting about a possibility of a used truck or gently used. This will give us the flexibility to look at all avenues and see what dealerships have. It won't be like a one dealership thing. We'll look around, but it's just the ability to negotiate and procure vehicles this way. So gladly take any questions.
Okay, any question on what they're trying to do here? I'm glad you clarified the used vehicle.
Right.
It's, you know, sometime, well, Murray can maybe vouch for that. You get a vehicle coming in off a lease, you know, it's still got a lot of life left in it yet, so. Okay, if there are no further questions on that, where am I here? Okay, there we go. That the Council of Municipality of West Perth authorizes the manager of recreation facilities and the manager of operations to procure 4 vehicles through the single source and or direct negotiation in accordance with bylaw 54, 2018, being the West Perth procurement policy. We have a mover and second for that, Councillor Duck, and seconded by Councillor Foster. Last chance for any questions. Okay, all those in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried. Thanks, Darcy. All right, next up is Wendy with the first quarter financial update.
Good
So,
evening, Council.
Can I make a comment before you, I don't want to throw you under the bus here, but I found that first quarter report hard to look at. And it could be because I don't know how to work my iPad, because when I turn it sideways, the document goes the other way. And I'm sure there's a way to do it.
I think our first edition of it, it was the right way and added the logo last minute and then it went out sideways. So my apologies on that. It will be the right way going forward. Okay, so this will be the first time you've seen the first quarter and it's in under the new format from the previous monthly ones. It does follow the same as the budget process. So you have the FIR groupings as a summary, and then you have department level, and then you have a line by line detail. And then the comments managers went through and reviewed them, and variances that were outside of that 75% were commented on, or if there was things that we knew it was still sitting at 100, a comment was added there. So if there's any questions, and the report did highlight some items. Everything seems to be in par with the budget.
Okay, thanks, Wendy. Does anybody have any questions? Other than my comments about having a hard job trying to read it? Okay, if there's nothing further, then recommendation is that the municipality of West Perth receives the first quarter 2023 financial update for information. And mover and seconder would be appreciated. Oh, question? Oh, sorry, Dean. Oh, you're going to move that, and they're seconded by Nicholas. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried. Thank you. All right, the next one is the pedestrian safety study, and Audrey is going to walk us through that one in the absence of Dan, who's home watching us on Zoom. So go ahead, Audrey.
Thank you, Mayor McKenzie. The report before you is seeking council authorization to use funds from the Parking Meters Reserve Fund for a pedestrian safety study. There have been traffic concerns and pedestrian safety concerns that have been raised in downtown Mitchell as well as Francis Street in front of the school. And the study will assist staff in developing some solutions to those concerns.
Okay, thanks, Audrey. Any questions for Audrey on that? If you remember, that kind of came through the police services through some concerns. Well, I guess initially through the crossing guards, especially downtown. So it filtered through us to us through that police services board. So if there is no questions, the recommendation is that the municipality of West Perth authorizes the clerk to use up to $11,000 for a pedestrian safety study, and that the project be funded from the parking meter reserve fund. And a mover and seconder, Councillor Rose, Councillor Chessel. Last call for questions. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried. Thank you. The next item was the one that's just been added, I guess tonight almost, and that's the rental agreement, and Jeff's got the information on that. And maybe everybody has a sheet on their desk. or is it
Yes,
just me?
there'll be a report on each of your desks, and I'll just quickly drop through it. It's a request for decision report from council. My apologies for adding this one late. We did close this tender. I believe it was on Wednesday, and I just missed picking up the tenders and getting it in under the council deadline. But I wanted to do this so the successful tender knows that they're getting the hayfield. So for those that are new on council, this is the 24-acre parcel which we have tendered on an annual basis. Yes, thanks, Anna. The last 3 years, this is land that we own in the Heron Business Park. We are only tendering it and renting it on an annual basis because we're hoping to make progress and don't want to enter into a long-term contract that we have to break. The use of the field is restricted to hay, so not for parking or storage or anything like that. It's for the production of hay. It's 24 acres. The property was advertised for rent in the April 5th and April 12th editions of the Mitchell Advocate. We also pushed it hard on socials, and we received 3 bids. The summary of the bids is on your desk. I'll just mention that the bidders were Michelle Murray for $3,300, Len Roney for $2,600, and Doug and Brian Knight for $900. We reviewed the information that was submitted with the package for the high bidder and found it to be complete. So staff are recommending that the rental agreement be awarded to Michelle Murray. So I'd like to I'll read the resolution into the record, and I want to add a little piece at the end authorizing the mayor and clerk to sign all necessary documents. So the recommendation is that council for the municipality of West Perth award the rental of 9.7 hectares, 24 acres of municipal owned agricultural land described as part of Lot 22 Concession 1, former Fullerton Township, located north of Frank Street, to the highest bid submission received from Michelle Murray in the amount of $3,300 plus HST, and the mayor and clerk be authorized to sign the documents to enact the agreement.
You've heard the motion. Do we have a mover and seconder for that? Councillor Rose, Councillor Foster, all those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Okay, moving on then, correspondence. We have 3 items of correspondence, the road supervisors, and they're asking us to support that. And I guess we can maybe do that if you so wish, or we can bring it back next meeting for an endorsement. The Stratford Hospital is just tours of the hospital there, and Ken comes just advertising their charter nights. So what would you like to do with the road supervisors letter that we have? They're requesting support with regards to in-bridge gas. I believe it was a $200 fee that they were going to charge for locates. Councilor Deputy Mayor Trinkowski.
No, thank you, your worship. Through you, I would be interested to find out a little bit more about, oh, well, I guess I'll back up. I would like to bring this back for further review at the next council meeting. And in doing so, I would ask staff to provide some information on the Getting Ontario Connected Act. Just want to get some better information of how things developed to this point, just to see what the back history is before we have a further discussion and make a decision on what we want to do with that.
Okay, I think that's a good resolution, and we'll just direct staff to bring it back with maybe a little bit further information with regards to that. The others, I think you can respond on your own terms or respond to you, Audrey. Yep, okay, you can talk to Audrey about it. So the recommendation coming out of that is that Council Municipality of West Perth accept correspondence as information. Moved by Councillor Phelps, seconded by, I'm going to take Councillor Fournier. I don't think I've got him tonight so far. So anyway, seconded by Councillor Fournier. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. I don't think we have any further council reports at this time, not that I'm aware of. So we do have some bylaws. Bylaw 280 is a bylaw on exempt part lot control, what Jerica talked about earlier in the evening. Bylaw 10 is a bylaw to provide for drainage works for the Morello Municipal Drain. And bylaw 11 is a bylaw to provide for drainage works in the Snyder's Copeman Drain. And the recommendation is that the municipality of West Perth give first and second readings to basically the first one, the zoning bylaw 280. 2023. So we can do that, give first and second readings to that one. If we have a mover and seconder, Councillor Duck, Councillor Foster, all those in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried. And then the next recommendation is that the Council Municipality of West Perth give third and final reading to bylaw, zoning bylaw 280, 2023, bylaw 10, bylaw 11. Mover and seconder for that, Councillor Chessel, and seconded by Councillor Duck. Any further questions on that? All those in favor? Okay, that is carried. Just as a clarification, and maybe Audrey can talk about this, something I wasn't aware of. Normally, when we get the quarter revision and we give it the third reading, we have the tenders. But under the Drainage Act now, and Audrey, I'll let you explain. You took the drainage course.
So under the Drainage Act, once third and final passing of the bylaw is approved by council, we would have to wait 10 days in case we get any notices of appeals for the decision of council. Once the 10 days has passed, then the tender award for the construction will be brought to the next council meeting.
Did you know that, Nicholas? No, I didn't know that either. I think that must be new. So anyway, we'll play by the rules. Yeah, I know. All right, upcoming events. The community spring cleanup is Saturday on the 22nd. And there's a dog park tree planting on the 29th. Also, there's a couple things coming up, I believe, later this week. The volunteer, looking for volunteers. I forget what you call that night.
Volunteer fair.
Volunteer fair is on the Wednesday night, I believe. And I don't know how. And then the volunteer appreciation is on Thursday night. And we have Lloyd Robertson coming to speak at that. And I haven't seen a lot of advertising for that. At least I haven't noticed a lot. I don't know if we can.
So we pushed it pretty hard for socials, and we also direct invited. So we kind of covered it both ways, but I will mention that Lloyd Robertson has been very good to offer to provide. He's provided us with a case of books and he's attending. He made this commitment over 3 years ago. So talk about a man of his word. He's coming to do his talk to this group now.
Good, very good. Okay. Oh, sorry.
The dog park tree planting, who's heading that up, or? Hannah, are you digging?
Hi, thank you for the question, Councillor Phelps. So the dog park tree planting event is an event being spearheaded by the Environment, Forestry and Trails Committee. So it was their kind of brainchild to reforest part of the dog park. This is separate from the Paws and Paths grant application that we put in that will eventually link these two projects. But the tree planting will be 55 total vegetations. Red osier dogwood, white cedar, silver maple, and I think some oak. And they'll be placed strategically in the dog park because right now it's just basically an open field and there's a lot of wind that goes through there. So they'd like to create some more substantial windbreaks and just help feed into the naturalization of the wetlands. So that event is open to the public for volunteers, but there will be a lot of volunteers coming out to plant from the Environment, Forestry and Trails Committee. So you don't have to register to come out and help plant some trees. Please don't make me do it all by myself. So
Just
we
bring a
welcome,
shovel.
just bring your own shovel. And we'd love to see council out and make an appearance at the dog park. So thank you.
Thanks, Hannah. Good. Okay, under other business, we do have a sign bylaw, I guess an exemption, and I'm going to let Audrey talk about that.
Thank you, Mayor McKenzie. So the municipality received a request from McDonald's Mitchell to place signs around the community advertising the opening of their new restaurant under sign bylaw 80-2010. Signs are not permitted in the municipal allowance, and this exemption would just allow McDonald's to place those signs temporarily to advertise their big event.
Okay, any questions on that, or Ryan?
Is this something that we've just granted like multiple times or for new businesses or just obviously for certain specific reasons, kind of like a new business opening?
Yes, that is correct. The exemption is granted on a case-by-case basis, and typically they would go to council for approval.
Oh, Councillor Foster.
Is that a municipal road allowance? Isn't that on the highway?
So this would also include the municipal road allowances in the community, so the like the boulevards and whatnot, but partly on the highway as well. Yes.
Any other questions?
I'll just add that, you know, we have this bylaw so that we don't have a cluttering of signs, and we often see a real proliferation of signs in the spring with painting contractors and things like that. We pick them up when we see them. If you want to get permission to post a temporary sign, our position is you can ask. This is the process you ask. And if you don't ask, our bylaw enforcement, building staff and others pick them up as they see them, or else the municipality becomes very cluttered.
Okay. If there is no further questions, we do have a recommendation here. And that the Council of Municipality of West Perth, in accordance with bylaw number 80, 2010, grant McDonald's an exemption to place temporary mobile signs within the municipality road allowances, and that the clerk be authorized to approve specific locations and requirements. We have a mover and seconder for that. Councillor Fournier, Councillor Phelps, all those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. You want to talk about this one? Sure. So there's one other thing under other business, and you want to talk about it? Doug kind of mentioned it tonight, and I thought of the same thing when I was reading the county surplus farmhouse thing with keeping animals. So Jeff?
So I was just going to suggest, and Dan was losing his voice and wasn't able to be here tonight, but if you have the resolution for the chicken delegation, we didn't receive the delegation again tonight, but we were going to recommend as staff that council just direct staff to go off and do research to anticipate, rather than wait for the delegation and know that that's going to be the action we're going to recommend staff to do. We can go off and begin to do the research and we can bring it back in the course of time. You can decide later if you want us to bring it back once we hear the right delegation, or whether you want to bring it back, whether the delegation comes or not. But we're just asking for a resolution to direct staff to begin the process of collecting the information.
So I think we call that being proactive instead of reactive. But we do need a motion.
Dan had one, but now I've got to find it.
Or we can make one up here. Unless you think you can find it.
It'll just take me a moment if you, can you sing a song, Call the Square Dance?
Well, I could ask another other business question.
Yes, go ahead.
I was wondering how around this table that we might start a conversation to engage the United Way in submitting an application on our behalf for this federal housing acceleration fund that might be available. But that would be something that I was wondering how that conversation would get started.
I would, are you still looking? Okay. Oh, I would suggest that at a future, in the near future council meeting, we have a bit of a discussion on this. I think our biggest thing is, we're going to need a location at some point down the road. But certainly, they were certainly willing to work with us on that. And it comes out in July, so we've got a month or so, but I think you raise a good point, Nicholas, and I think we just need to have a consensus and a chat with council here. So I don't know how our next agenda is. If we can pick a night that we don't have a lot on the agenda, it would be a good opportunity to do that. Doug?
She also, I'm sorry, I didn't write it down, but she also spoke of someone that is particularly versed in housing. It'd be nice to have them come and speak to what the song and dance is to do.
Sorry. Do you have a motion yet? Anybody?
So yes, and so I have a motion and I think, so we'll take that as direction, that second item of business, so it's not lost. And I think having an expert come and speak to us, and we'll try to fit that into an agenda. And then on the motion for that Council of the Municipality of West Perth direct staff to research options for residential chickens and report back to council.
Okay, moved by Councillor Fournier, and who haven't I had today? Pretty well everybody. What's that? I've had everybody? Okay, all right. So Councillor Fournier and Councillor Rose. Question from Councillor Fournier.
Just a really quick question regarding the research. If you could, I have some experience with chickens, and make sure that you recommend no roosters. They're bloody dangerous. No, really, they go for the eyes. You got kids around, you got problems if you got roosters.
Okay, Councillor Deputy Mayor Jankowski.
Yep, through you, your worship. When staff conducts their research, I would ask or suggest that they get the relevant information from the CFIA, Canadian Food Inspection Agency. The thought or the concern being about avian flu being one thing to be considered, and also find out from the relevant poultry groups, whether it's Chicken Farmers Ontario or Egg Farmers, about similar, if they have any comments or concerns about this kind of a policy being contemplated. Thanks.
You can, we can also tap into other municipalities, and there is a list of municipalities that do allow it. But St. Thomas has just, it came up at their last council meeting. So They're working on a bylaw as well. So I think there's lots of resources.
And I'll just mention in terms of, I think that's exactly it. I think the starting point is to start with this conversation about the topic and what it looks like and what municipalities are, how they're approaching it. And then come back with that. And before we move into the next stage, which might involve surveys or some kind of public engagement in the community. So not suggesting we go off and do this giant research project and come back and we haven't given you the information you want. I think it might be a few steps, but we just get the process started. And I don't think we have a mover and seconder yet, or did we?
So we have a mover and seconder, but we didn't vote on that yet. So any further comments about this, Doug?
I did send Dan a thing from the CFIA about a month ago, so he already has that. But there may be other areas they can look at, but yeah.
Okay, all right. Oh, Councillor Foster?
It's only about chickens, right? Like it's not about any other backyard livestock of any kind, for lack of a better term. Like
That's
not-
my
not
understanding. We're
rabbits
just
or something.
looking chickens. Pardon? Yes, chickens, yes. Yeah.
So the motion was intended to cover chickens and I think, you know, banties and those kinds of things would be caught, but we'll certainly bring it back in steps. So we weren't, yeah, I wasn't looking at, don't think rabbits or I could offer other options, but
I was just wondering if it was about any other farmer board would want to be notified.
Okay, we still haven't had a vote, so unless there's something else, all those in favor of that motion? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Thank you. All right, brings us to, oh, sorry, Dean, go ahead.
Great, through you, your worship, just wanted to circle back to Councillor Banks' query about the housing. It was identified during the election campaign as through the public as a concern and a need. So I guess further to Councillor Banks' query, like we have to have the visioning discussion first, and then pending on how that evolves, then there would need to be policy development by the municipality and then a platform to deliver any services. But first, we need to have the visioning discussion, find out what direction we want to take, and then go from there. So I would support Councillor Banks' suggestion, and I believe Councillor Bank made a motion towards housing in the last term. So we're following up on what we discussed previous.
Okay, thanks, Dean. All right. We still haven't got a vote. Okay, all right, it's been duly moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Okay, that's carried. All right, brings us down to confirmatory bylaw, and it's bylaw 19, 2023, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the council for the corporation and municipality of West Perth. We read a first and second time the 17th day of April. Do we have a mover and seconder for that? Councillor Foster. Councillor O'Donnell. All those in favor? That is carried. And further, that bylaw 19, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the council of the corporation and municipality of West Perth, be read a third time and finally passed the 17th day of April. And a mover and seconder for that, Councillor Rose, Councillor Foster. All those in favor? That is carried. And finally, a motion to adjourn at 9:10 p.m. Moved by Councillor Vink, seconded by Councillor Chessel. All those in favor? We are adjourned.